Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, CRM Basics, Managing Your Growth Machine, presented by the Florida SBDC at UCF. My name is Christopher Bogstad, and I'm an associate consultant at the Florida SBDC, and I'll be hosting the webinar today along with our presenter, John Finnegan. Before we get started, I'd like to give a brief overview about the SBDC. The SBDC, or Small Business Development Center at UCF, is an economic development organization that exists to help small businesses grow and succeed, and we serve an 8-county region. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and are partially funded by the US SBA, State of Florida, and other local support organizations and community partners. The SBDC has been around for 45 years, and we have offices throughout Florida, ranging from our headquarters in Pensacola all the way to the Keys, with each region being hosted by a university or state college. In Central Florida, we are hosted by UCF. Our service offerings include no-cost, one-on-one consulting in all different areas of business, and normally in-person, but now virtual seminars on various business topics and strategies. Now, before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping rules. Your mics are muted by default, but if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions chat box feature in the GoToWebinar panel at any time, and we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. And please don't use the raise hand feature. Again, just use the questions box. Copies of today's presentation can be found under the Handouts tab on the GoToWebinar panel, and evaluation surveys for this webinar will be emailed to you shortly after the session. So please check your inbox at the conclusion and submit your feedback as soon as you can so we can improve our future offerings. Now, before I pass it over to John, I would like to give a brief introduction of today's presenter. John Finnegan has been a business consultant with the SBDC at UCF for the past 2 years, starting as a volunteer advisor and moving into a full-time role in 2020. He's part of the consulting team working with small business clients in Central Florida. Prior to his SBDC role, John worked for 30 plus years in the business world, typically in senior business development roles. He's worked in large multi-billion-dollar Fortune 200 corporation and medium-sized 500 to 700 million businesses. He founded and managed 2 successful small businesses in Central Florida and has contributed business development and general management guidance to a number of others. His formal business education includes a BBA and an MBA from the University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. And with that, I will turn it over to John.
Christopher, thank you so much. What was that last part?
Go Badgers.
Go Badgers. Okay, thank you. Christopher, I appreciate the introduction, the warm introduction. Christopher has been working with us at the SBDC now for a couple of years as well. And if he's got a little bit of an accent, it's because he's from this wonderful faraway land called Norway. So thank you, Christopher. If I'm talking with you folks for an hour or so about CRMs, hopefully I've got some experience with CRMs, and it's almost frightening when I looked back when I started using CRMs. Actually, I was a sales rep for a national freight company, national trucking company, back in the early 90s, and I was using a program called ACT to manage my customers and my prospects back in the early 90s. In the later 90s, I helped a business. I was their corporate sales training manager. I was part of their team. They were implementing a CRM at the corporate level. It was probably a $700 million business at that time. And we were just getting into the CRM business, and I was part of their implementation team. I've used probably a dozen different CRMs in different formats, including the industry leader Salesforce. I used Salesforce with a couple of different businesses. So very familiar with how CRMs work, both for large multi-billion-dollar corporations. I've seen it work the way it's supposed to work. And then with mid-size and smaller businesses, I've seen the way it's not supposed to work. So can help you there. One of the things I'll tell you, so we're going to talk for the next 60 minutes or so about CRM. If you think about it, that's not a lot of time to cover what is really a pretty important topic. There are CRM professionals out there that do it for a living. It's now it's something like a $54 billion market, $54 billion a year. There are business school courses devoted to CRMs. So for us to kind of cover a lot in 60 minutes is not realistic. So here's what I would want to be able to talk about as far as the expectations. So I've got some expectations. If there are business owners or business executives from small businesses that aren't yet into the CRM mode, one of my goals is that at the end of this discussion, you're going, yeah, we're late to the party. It's time to get going. If there are small business owners and business executives that have made the commitment into the CRM, but haven't moved forward. In other words, you're using it almost like a contact base, but you're not using it very efficiently. You certainly haven't customized it based on your business and your sales process. And my goal would be to get you moving forward. Let's not just use it as a contact manager. Let's use it like it's supposed to be used, and let you get you moving forward. And then from your perspective, my thought is, from your perspective, if you invest an hour of time listening to me yammer on, you get a couple things from it. A couple of aha moments where you go, I like that. I get it. You write it down and you go, I think that's good. I hadn't thought about that. So if during the course of this presentation, you get a couple of those, good. That's a win. And then here's what I would recommend you as we go through this. Christopher mentioned a little bit about questions. Here's what I would tell you is, if you have questions, ask questions. We've left, probably 10 or 12 minutes at the end for questions, but I think there's more value to let's have the questions during the conversation, during the topic. And if you ask, think about it this way: if you have the question, there are maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other people that are on this presentation that might have the same question. If I can answer your question and it's your aha moment, maybe that's the same for another handful of people. So don't be hesitant to ask questions. This is a little bit what we're going to talk about. Christopher, what I would suggest is go ahead and release the first poll. Christopher's going to release a poll for you. It shouldn't take more than a few seconds. And what we're trying to do is get a sense of the experience you have with CRM. Are you early in the process? Are you beginners? Are you kind of farther in the process, or are you kind of an expert? And Christopher will announce the results after I'm done showing you what the agenda is today. And that'll give me a little bit of a direction as to where to point the discussion. If we look at the crowd here, the group here, and we'll probably end up with 50 or so people watching, but if it's typically more entry level, that's what the discussion will be pointed to. If the group is a little bit more sophisticated, you got it?
Yeah, we have 66% voted. If you still haven't voted, please go ahead a couple more seconds.
Yeah, okay.
Before I close it up.
Okay. While we're waiting, so Christopher, I'm going to go through the agenda here just in a couple of minutes, just so people know what to expect. And then when I'm done with the agenda, you can kind of pop on in. So there's three parts of this. Is why use a CRM. I'm only going to spend a few minutes on the why. If you're here, you probably get the why part of it. There are a couple of topics or a couple of statistics in there that I think you might not be aware of, and that might be valuable to you. And it's certainly going to kind of encourage you to keep moving forward with the CRM. And we're going to spend probably the bulk, about half of the time, talking about CRM setup for your business. You're going to hear me say CRM for your business. The CRMs these days are very adaptable. You can really edit them. You can customize them. Most of them, especially if they're one of the top CRMs in the marketplace, they are very adaptable. So it's always about adapting the CRM to your business so it's efficient. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is a little bit about moving forward. Once you have the CRM, a couple of key points for using a CRM as you move forward. So those are the topics we're going to talk about. Christopher, why don't you give us the kind of results of the first poll?
Yes, so the results to the poll, 56% voted beginner, 28% voted moderates, 16% voted advanced, and 0% experts.
And what was the last one?
0% for experts.
Okay. So it's a kind of more of an entry level problem. Okay. Even more value if you're kind of an entry level, beginner. Even more value for questions if you have the questions. Okay. The concept: why use a CRM? So here are kind of some of the basic statistics that you're probably aware of. 91% of businesses with 11 or more employees use a CRM. 91%, obviously that number is growing. And I did a webinar last year, and I said during this webinar that if you're not using a CRM, you're not 5 years behind, you're 2 decades behind, you're way behind. So you see that 90% of businesses with 11 employees or more are using a CRM, obviously a little bigger. 57% of businesses with 10 employees or less are using a CRM. That kind of surprises me. It's a little disappointing, but if you're one of the 43% that isn't using a CRM, hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a better sense that you're committed to using. 87% are cloud-based. The average ROI on CRM investment is almost $9 for every dollar. And these aren't statistics I pulled out of my ears. If you Google CRM use, you're going to see this. Here are some of the things that maybe you haven't thought of, or maybe you didn't know. So of the businesses that use CRMs, excuse me, of the businesses that use CRMs, 8% to 14% suggests that it is helping them. It's helped them shorten the sales cycle. So instead of their sales cycle being, an average of 6 months, maybe it shrunk to 5 months or something like that. 47% report improved customer retention. 29% report improved sales productivity. And then they also believe that it's increased sales conversion rates. I really believe all of those. But for the most part, we're thinking about how does the CRM help us with our business development? How does it help us with our sales outreach? And if it helps shorten the sales cycle, perfect, even better. If it helps us improve customer retention, perfect, even better. Okay, a couple things to consider. Let's see what else I have here. Okay. Well, one of the things, and I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, is having a CRM is the first step. Using it properly is not necessarily the same thing. So using it properly, and especially if you're on this presentation, you have the ability to reach out to the SBDC. You have the ability to get somebody like you to help implement it correctly. So you've made the commitment to go to CRM, and you've used it as a contact manager for a while. Okay, let's take it to the next step. Reach out to the SBDC and let's implement it the way it should be implemented. And then look at this. So here are some other things that a strongly delivered CRM improves access to customer data. That goes without saying. Improves lead management. That goes without saying. More efficient customer service. That's a huge additional benefit. Improved sales forecasting. That's part of the deal. Improved customer retention. Lower customer acquisition cost. All huge value to getting the CRM. Oops. All right. The other thing, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, it's looking at CRM as one component of the enterprise system. The enterprise system is the synchronized organization of your business process from beginning to end. CRM is typically considered on the front part of your process. Then you move over to a project manager, then you move into an accounting program, something like that. The CRM component of it, some of them include proposal builders, some of them that's an add-on. Some of them include an email marketing component, some of them that's an add-on. Some of them have a little bit of a digital marketing component, some it's an add-on. If you're at the position where you have a CRM and all of this is connected and it's all synchronized, you're way ahead of where you were before you got there. So the proposal, it's such a simple concept. A proposal builder, and I'm only going to spend a minute on it, is you have your CRM database in there and you have prospects and you start reaching out to a prospect. The prospect says, that's kind of interesting. Why don't you give me a proposal on it? Everything is automated. So you go in there, you click on that prospect, it populates all of the fields. You go to the proposal builder and you start clicking on, what are the different either services or products that you're presenting to that particular prospect. You put in the quantity, you put in the price, and it develops a proposal for you automated. And instead of doing that separately as a separate function, in a matter of seconds typically or minutes, you can build a proposal. Big fan of that. Okay, so especially because we have 56% of the people that are kind of beginners, I want to put this in perspective. So think of our business. I'm going to use an example here. It's Central Florida PPE. Central Florida PPE. So we sell, this is the example, we sell personal protective equipment, and we typically sell to home builders, commercial general contractors, subcontractor businesses, and remodelers. That's our business. We've identified a prospect, Green Custom Homes, and we've identified a purchasing manager, Jennifer Perez. She's the purchasing manager. This is a one case example. Okay, now think of it this way. I just want to go through, just so we're all in the same kind of path here, this is a Central Florida PPE. This is Green Custom Homes. They're based in Central Florida. They use our product. They use PPE. Jennifer is now she's buying a PPE equipment. Every week she's buying PPE. She's buying them from somebody else. She's not buying them for us. She doesn't even know who we are. She's buying them from a competitor of ours. We have zero chance, unless we get her attention, we have zero chance of getting Green Custom Home businesses. So this is the process. And I'm going to spend just a couple minutes. So she's got zero brand awareness. She wouldn't know Central Florida PPE if we fell on this guy and hit her in the head. So we're going to start the reach out process. We're going to do things like intro email. We're going to link in, connect to her on LinkedIn. We're going to do an intro call. Whatever that campaign is, we're going to get her attention. We're going to move her from zero brand awareness, where we are now, to some awareness. Now she's heard of Central Florida PPE. She starts to recognize names. If I'm the sales professional that's pursuing her business, now she recognizes my name. She realizes that she's buying our product, so she has a need for our product, and then she responds. So that's taking us through the first part of the sales process. Okay, that's times one. So if Jennifer and Green Custom Homes was our only prospect, pretty easy to manage, right? You don't need a database manager. You don't need a CRM. You can write it on a piece of paper. You can do a little Excel spreadsheet. So if you got one prospect, and raise your hand. I'm joking, but raise your hand if you only have one prospect. That's not the case. That's simply not the case. Okay. Multiply that by hundreds or thousands. So that same process that we follow with Jennifer and Green Custom Homes, Okay, now multiply that by, if we're trying to attract home builders in Central Florida plus 50 miles, I did a database search, 1,267 results. We're looking at general contractors, Orlando plus 50 miles, another 1,500. If we went through and cleaned those up, maybe there are, 500 or 600 that are legitimate targets for us in home builders. Maybe there's 500 or 600 general contractors and subcontractors. So there's certainly hundreds, potentially thousands of targets out there. Now you can't manage it by keeping data on in a notepad. You can't do it. You can't do it effectively, certainly. Or you can't do it by keeping it in a contact database that's not a CRM. You can't do it by keeping it in a kind of a basic spreadsheet. Okay, so now what do we do? So now the CRM, everybody understand, we talked about going from zero awareness to awareness, brand awareness, to an engagement, where there's an interest there for us. There's a sales, people call it sales funnel, people call it a sales pipeline. I'm a big believer in the mathematics of a sales pipeline for each individual business. It helps you understand if you've got enough activity in your pipeline to get you to the results that you want in terms of sales, in terms of revenue. I'm going to stop just for a second. Are there any pent-up questions there, Christopher?
Not at the moment, John.
Okay. I'm either talking too fast or something, which is not terribly unusual for me. Okay. So we're going to start looking at the CRM and looking at how the CRM can help us understand our entire business. So the first thing is we're putting contacts into the CRM, and they're different categories. So think about it this way. They're your current customers. So you're going to put your current customers or past customers, you're going to load them into the CRM. Each of them is going to have its own company name. Each of them might have a number of contacts within that business that you're tracking. So your own customers, and then prospects. So we talked about running business databases. Now, instead of just your current customer base, you've identified prospects, and you're loading prospects in, and it might be hundreds and it might be thousands. You might have strategic partners that you want to be able to maybe communicate with in an organized fashion. You might have vendors that you want to communicate to in an organized fashion. You might have people in your company that are in there, and maybe you want to communicate to them, and then maybe other. So this is all customizable based on your business. So however many categories of contacts you have in there and companies you have is up to you. Here's my real advice: is start simple. Don't start to overcomplicate it in the beginning. And I've used this. I think this is a reasonable starting point, because once you get into the CRM, once we get a little farther into this discussion, you're going to be able to see that you can start accessing prospects. You can combine them. You can put them into groups, and you can do the same with customers. You can do that with all of these, but you don't want 20 different categories unless there's value to you in separating those up. Okay, now we're going to take prospects. So all of these on the right, we're going to put off to the side. We're not going to really talk about them at any length, but we're going to focus on the prospect. So how do you want to categorize your prospects? And we're going to continue to talk about this a little bit. Prospects open, prospects active, prospects warm. They're moving ahead in the awareness, in the interest, in your sales process, and customers. We're going to touch on that in just a moment. Okay, then the prospects, all of these different categories of prospects, and I'm not trying to overcomplicate this. It really isn't that complicated. But I want you to know that you have control over what you want this to look like. And these are all customizable as well. Then you can organize your prospects. So, if you want to be able to segregate them based on industry. So if you're selling to various industries and your message or your product or your service to different industries might be different. For example, the example I used earlier with PPE, the products that you sell to home builders might be different than the products you sell to general contractors, might be different than the products you sell to subcontractors. So your message to your prospects based on the industry might be different. Same thing might be said about geography. So if you're selling to prospects in Florida, might be a different message than the products that you're selling to people in the north, for example. You can identify the source of the prospect. Where did you find the prospect? Did it come in through one of your digital marketing campaigns? Was it through a networking opportunity? Was it one of your, somebody that you knew from a previous business? What's the source? Because again, you may want to target different prospects from different sources. Okay, now this is what it looks like in the CRM. So we talked about, the category, prospect, customer. So every time you enter a new company into your CRM, you can assign them this category. And say you met somebody, they're a strategic partner, they're not really a competitor, they're not really a prospect. So you enter the company, you enter the contact, and you put them in as a strategic partner. Now they're stored in the CRM as a strategic partner. Align the process steps and use consistent terminology. So I talked about setting up the CRM, and I mentioned that the CRM is very adaptable. So you define your process and have the CRM match what your process is. And very doable, very easy to do, very practical to do. And when you're done with this whole thing, when you invested the time to program this CRM based on what your own internal process is, now you've got a CRM that supports your business properly. Okay.
Hey, John?
Yes.
I have a new question here.
Okay.
And the question is as follows. What if we start with a simple CRM, but then we want to integrate a program like QuickBooks, and we have to switch the CRM program to do that? Is it difficult to transfer all of the input we've already done over to a different CRM program?
Yeah. Yeah, the answer is almost never. So when you're looking at getting your first CRM, have a conversation with somebody to make sure that they synchronize with all of the common programs. So for example, an email marketing campaign, Constant Contact, DataChimp, those are all kind of fairly common email marketing campaigns. Make sure when you're talking to the CRM provider that they synchronize with, Constant Contact or whichever one you're using. Make sure, and most of them these days, especially most of the top ones, do integrate. Make sure that funny thing. What's the common accounting?
QuickBooks?
QuickBooks, yeah. How can I forget QuickBooks? So QuickBooks, make sure that they integrate with QuickBooks as well. Most of the the more popular ones are probably 90% do. So you get to the process where you want to start integrating those components. Typically, it's a pretty darn easy approach. It really is. All right. I want to go back to the sales pipeline, and this is going to be just a couple of minutes of a conversation. And think about in your business, what is the sales pipeline? And I'm going to recommend start simple. So here is kind of a real basic example that I put together, and I've actually recommended for a number of contacts because I think starting simple is so much easier than trying to start complicated. You can always start simple, Start simple and use it for a while. And then if there's value add to making it a little bit more involved, then make it more involved, but start simple. So prospects open, by definition, means you brought them into your system. Maybe it's a business list that you got from the SBDC. You've skimmed through it. You've identified the 200, 300, 500 that you want to start reaching out to. You bring them in, but you bring them in as prospects open. You haven't touched them. You've not done any research. Any reach out to them. They're in your system. You've identified them, but they don't know you any more than they did yesterday. So they're open. Then when you start the reach out campaign, so maybe you pull 200 over and you start to reach out to them. You start to, like we talked about, send them emails or group emails, or you include them in an email marketing campaign. You reach out to them on LinkedIn. Now you've started the reach out process. Now you're starting to build, brand awareness with them. You move them from prospects open to prospects active. Now, when you look in your CRM and you look at prospects active, if there's a company in there under prospects active, you've started reaching out to them. You've started the process. If you look in there under prospects open and this prospect is in there, you haven't started reaching out. So it gives you an understanding immediately of where that prospect has. Okay, now you're reaching out to prospects. Prospects warm is one of them reaches back, or a couple of them reach back. So they get an email from you and they respond and they go, yeah, we are interested. We are using PPE. We are using your product or services. We might be interested. Okay, now you move that particular prospect to prospects warm, and that's gold. Once they express an interest in your product or service, now you want to wrap your arms around them and you want to take it to the next level. You start meeting with them. They go, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Here's an order we would place. Can you give me a proposal? You've delivered a proposal to them. Now you take it to the next level. And then obviously, once you present a proposal to them, they're either going to accept it or they're not going to accept it. So then you move it to closed won, closed lost. This is critical. And you notice it's very simple. Prospects open, you haven't touched. Prospects active, you started a reach out campaign. Prospects warm, they've reached back, and now you've got a dialogue going. Proposal delivered and closed and won. Critical, absolutely critical to this rest of this discussion. And here's what it looks like. So you enter a company into your database. You categorize them as prospect. You put them as a prospect open, means you haven't touched them, and then you can move them through the process, prospect open, prospect active, that kind of thing. So this is what it looks like in action. That's what kind of, this is a particular HubSpot. It happens to be HubSpot. It's a particular fairly popular brand of CRM. The only thing I didn't talk about earlier, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, is high value targets. I recommend to almost every single client I talk to is identify high value targets. Those are the types of businesses that could change your world. That if you secured that company, it could change your business. So if you think about it this way, if you're providing PPE, you're the PPE, and you secure Lennar Homes or something like that, and they said, we're going to start buying all of our PPE through your business across the nation. And we buy $1 million a year of PPE. Now that's $1 million business that you just brought on. It changes your business. It changes your trajectory moving forward. So there may be, and I recommend the clients only look at a half dozen to a dozen, not more than that. And you're going to categorize them as high value targets because you want to treat them differently. We're not going to get into detail here, but obviously if you want to talk about it later, we can. Okay, and this is what it looks like. So this is a CRM where I'm into companies. I've got 576 companies, and I want to be able to go and look at my prospects open. All I do is click on that tab. It takes me right there. All of the prospects open means I haven't touched them, are listed there. I want to look at all my prospects active. I want to look at who is in there that I've started reaching out to. I want to be able to see how many I have in there. Prospects warm, that kind of thing. One more thing I'm going to kind of tag onto this. It's not appropriate to most of us here, is the bigger your business gets in terms of who's doing this reach out. So if it's you as an owner and you're the only one doing some reach out, doing the kind of the sales activity, you're probably going to know that for the most part. But it's still good to have. I want to know who my prospects warm are, the ones that I've got a dialogue going. And all you do is click on that. It shows your warm prospects. The bigger your business gets, the more people are doing those types of activities, the more important this is. The more important all of this is. And say you have 2 or 3 people that are doing sales activities, and maybe it's a hybrid. Maybe they're project managers or something like that, but they're also doing sales activities legitimately on a week-to-week basis. And they've got their own prospects in there. Maybe they even assign their own customers. You want to be able to see all of that, because once it gets past your scope, and it's Jose who's doing install, or even a customer service person who might be responsible for a customer base. You want to be able to see what they're doing. And this is kind of what it looks like. Okay, I'm gonna move a little bit to opportunities or deals. So I mentioned, once somebody, you move a prospect to warm, now they ask for a proposal. Okay, now we're into some CRMs call them opportunities and some call them deals. Either way, you can actually probably change it based on what is more relevant to your business. But how do you look at this? And once again, I'm going to keep it simple, and you can add to it. So think about it this way: once Green Custom Homes asks for a proposal, once they've said we're interested. Now we can start the intro. Now you have an opportunity with them. You're going to open up a new opportunity, and you're going to start with intro discussions. That means they haven't asked for a proposal yet, but they want to talk to you. Yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, we buy what you sell. Yeah, we should talk. You open up an opportunity or open up a deal, and you call it intro discussions. That's early stages. Okay. You move it along, you can have multiple discussions, multiple meetings. You can keep them in this category. You don't have to overcomplicate it. Now they ask for a proposal, you prepare it, you deliver it, and you might have a meeting following up. So it's proposal delivered. Anything that's in there, any business that's in there, that you've delivered a proposal, you've moved it along the process. You met with them, and they say, okay, yeah, we want to give it some thought. We want to do some comparisons. I'm going to run it past my boss. Our team's going to talk about it. So now you move it over to the decision process. There in this decision, you still want to maybe potentially reach back to them, but essentially it's in their hands, and we're waiting for a decision. And then at some point, there's only 2 outcomes. Other than they go cold on you, but 2 outcomes: either you're going to win it, they're going to send you, hey, yeah, we like your proposal, we're going to give you a try, close, won it, or we're staying where we are, closed, lost. So this is a very simple definition of process for these opportunities or deals that you've now uncovered. Very simple. And of course, this is what it looks like in the CRM. I've opened up a new deal. This is the prospect, JM's financial team. This is the proposal. I start with intro discussions, and we move it through. So, but this is kind of a little bit what it looks like in the CRM.
We have another question, John.
Yeah.
The question is as follows. Which CRM program would you recommend to start if we are a sole proprietor with only a small budget, 3 to 5 clients in a long sales cycle, a large project that can take over the course of 1 to 2 years?
Okay, in this day and age, this is going to be a general question, general answer you may not like, but in this day and age, the top most popular CRMs, and that probably goes down 25 or so, are very, very similar. They followed the path of Salesforce, and they're very similar. So there's not a whole lot of difference. I do have, and I'm going to mention this at the end as part of our resources. We've looked at, I think, 10 or so, 8 to 10 of the most popular CRMs, and we've analyzed them a little bit. And if you reach out to us, I can get you the top 8 or 10 that we've looked at. I would recommend, if you want to dig a little deeper into quantifying a CRM, reach out to one of us. We can help. As a point of interest, everybody's familiar with Salesforce. Before I looked at it, I thought Salesforce always a dominant player, but I thought that there were so many other ones that their market share has gone down. Just as an interest, Salesforce had 18.1% market share in 2016. 18%. Last year, at the end of 2020, that went from 18.1% to 19.8%, almost 20%. So Salesforce, as a percentage of the overall CRM market, is going up. There's a reason why they're going up, but there's a downside to that, is by far, by a function of 5 or 10 potentially, they are much more expensive. Okay, back to this. So this is the opportunity or deal. This is hugely valuable if you're an owner, you're responsible for the sales process, you're responsible for sales, you're responsible for revenue. This gives you the ability, this is kind of a dashboard. It gives you the ability to see the totality of what's in your pipeline. And I've just got a handful of them in here. These are the different levels of the different parts of the process. We talked about intro, proposal delivered, decision process closed 1. I've got 3 of them in here. Typically, if you're an ongoing business, you might have a dozen or 20 or whatever that number is. I just plugged in a handful here just to give you a sense. So the ones that you're starting to talk to people, and what you typically do is you estimate an amount. You give it an estimate as to what you think the potential value is. That may change, that's fine, but at least it gives you a starting point. So we've got 3 of them in here. We've got $189,000 in the pipeline that are at this level of the opportunity. The proposal delivered, you got 2 of, we have 2 of them in there at a total of $98,000. Decision process, so we've got 2 of them in there that are at $60,000. And then our performance this year, we've closed handful of them here. We've closed, I think, 3 or 4 of them, 138,000, something like that. And you can see here, we haven't lost any. I refuse to put that we lost anything that we pursued. So we didn't lose any, that's good. We won 138,000. And then this is the total of what we have in our pipeline at various stages. I'm gonna kind of leverage that one more step, and I'm gonna add a deal probability or confidence level to it. It's one more level of understanding what your pipeline is. You can hold off on that, or you can do it right away. But here's what the confidence level factor does for you is, I think of it in the general sense. If I'm the PPE and I'm chasing that home builder Green's custom home, And she goes, yeah, I typically buy, $40,000 a month. No, let's say $50,000 a month, just to keep it consistent with this. I buy $50,000 a month, and your confidence level, the deal probability, because you've gone far enough, the purchasing person has given you very positive response. So your confidence level in this deal is 80%. So your weighted amount, the amount you can kind of anticipate, is going to be 40,000. It's not terribly critical with one, but when you have dozens of deals in the pipeline and you add a confidence level as an owner or as the chief business development officer, it gives you a better, more practical understanding of what you can expect at the end, because you're putting in deal probability. And you know this as well as I do, if you've got a proposal out there, they're not very receptive. They said no more than they said yes when you're talking to them. You give it a deal probability of 20% because, you go, yeah, I got them a proposal. I'm not terribly confident. In fact, I'm less than 50% confident. But this gives you the ability to multiply all of your proposals in your pipeline by a confidence level for each proposal. Okay, we're coming to the end of process, and obviously we've only dealt with a couple of things, but the good thing is this is one of the resources we have. We have a kind of a CRM setup checklist that helps you through the process, that gives you some guidance. My recommendation is if you want one of these, just ask us for it. We'll get it to you. And then there's huge value to talking with an SBDC consultant. We can kind of help you through and give you a little guidance in this process. Hey, do you want to go ahead and do the second, I'm getting ahead of myself. The second poll.
Yeah, I'm launching on now.
It'd be hard to do the third poll because we only have two total polls. So doing the third one. Okay.
Please go ahead and submit your answers. I will have this open for a couple of more seconds.
Yeah, when we get back, I'll be talking about, or I am talking about, and you'll see my presentation slide, is adding prospects. So if you're looking for, you want a base of prospects that meet your, what industry are they in? What geography are they in? Where are they geographically? Okay, are we back?
Can I share the results?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I have the results here. So 67% at step 0. We do not yet have a CRM. Wow. 13% beginning, 17% advanced, and 4% stated our CRM is set up and is meeting our current expectations. Okay. So the majority is in the beginning stages, it appears.
Okay. So the 67% of you who are at ground zero, congratulations on your honesty. What have you been waiting for? The beautiful thing is you have somebody that can help. So obviously the SBDC can help. Okay. Given that really the bulk of these folks are at the beginning, I'm going to do this fairly quickly, but think about it this way. You want to be able to populate your CRM with potential prospects, and that's where you come to us and we run business lists for you. Now here's my point here is these are all of the different demographic categories and data categories that you can get from some of the business data lists that we can run. And you can see that there's probably literally 100 or so, or maybe more than 100 of these different demographics. So executive last name 2, it goes all the way to executive last name 50. Okay, well, you don't need that many. So here's what you can choose. Here's what I'm recommending. Something simple where you're just getting the data that you're looking for that has value to you. Now there might be some of this, the credit score alpha, or is it a home business, or do they own or lease? Okay, if that stuff is kind of, if there's value to you, we can plug those in, we can add those over here. If there's no value to it, don't worry about it. Okay, so here's what a business list typically looks for. This is kind of the typical format I typically recommend, and here's why. It's the simple format. There's not data in there that isn't extraneous. So think about it this way, what's the company name? Critical. Executive first, last name, critical. Where are they located? What's the title of the executive? Telephone number, website, all pretty important. Primary SIC code. And then here I put these in there. So in many cases, or in most cases, if you're chasing a prospect that you don't know, you don't recognize, you want to know how big they are. How many people do they have? And think of it, if you're selling PPE, the more people that they have working, probably the more demand for PPE that they're going to have, for example. And then, what are they doing at the location? We can run these lists based on various location revenue specs. In other words, if you really want to focus on smaller businesses and you don't really want anything over 20 million, for example, we can run a business list based on 0 annual revenue to 20 million. If you're just the opposite and you want to be able to look at larger companies, we can start at 10 million and work our way up to hundreds of billions of dollars. Okay, one more point I'm going to add in here. Let's see what we're doing for time. Oops. Make sure that the names of the fields are the same as the names of the fields in your CRM, so everything downloads appropriately. Okay, one more quick thing. Outside agents, do you deal with them? Do you tie them in? Absolutely. Huge value. So if you're using manufacturers reps or you're using an outsourced sales firm, you absolutely plug them in. And the quick answer to why is you don't treat them as adversaries, you treat them as partners. And this is data that's available to them, but it's because they're working for you and as outside agents or marketing firms. What you do is you set up the guardrails. So you give them only access to the prospects that they should have access to. You only give them read-write access to those prospects. You don't let them edit anything. You typically would set up a report. They can't run reports, but maybe you can set up a custom report for them and then you can run it for them. Dashboarding and reports. Obviously, the CRMs these days have so much flexibility in terms of how you set up custom dashboards and how you set up custom reports. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time with it because whatever report you want, we can provide. And again, I would tell you, keep it simple. Don't get swept up in the analyzation of the data. Okay, what we didn't cover, CRMs sync with email marketing, like Constant Contact. They sync with digital marketing applications. And then we didn't talk about activity management. You can only cover so much in an hour. How to proceed? It's a process. That's Billy Bean from Moneyball. Start looking at the ideas, especially for the 67% that are at ground zero, or at step zero rather. Start identifying what do you want to accomplish, start evaluating, and then move forward and implement. If this approach works, I can assure you. I can assure you it works. Okay, these are some resources that we have. So this is CRM. It's a 10-page primer on CRM basics. I've taken it from multiple online credible sources. So you can request that from us. A CRM checklist I talked about earlier. This is data access. We have a business list field I showed you a little bit earlier. Seek professional help. What should I do now? Okay, Christopher, I'm going to send it over to you for questions. I think we have a few minutes left. But yes. Just before I send it over to you is, if you're here, you're aware of the FSBDC at UCF. We absolutely can help, especially if you're at step zero. We can walk you through. Okay, Christopher from Norway. You have questions?
Yeah, so some of the questions are referring to free versions of CRM programs. Could you give some insight into free versus paid, and if free CRMs are worth considering?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And here's what I would tell you is if you're interested in a free version, Google free CRMs. You'll see how many are out there. I think there's huge value because think of the CRMs, they're trying to attract small businesses when you're small. And offering you a free version, there's value to them, there's value to you because as you grow, you're going to want to add licenses. So typically there's a little bit of limited functionality. Still gives you the ability to get started on them, but with no charge and no risk. So you can get started, probably a limited number of licenses, maybe just a couple of licenses. So in other words, only a couple people can use it. Probably has reduced functionality. There's no synchronization with the other thing, but I completely recommend free CRMs as a starting point.
Second question we have is as follows. You talked a little about sharing access with outsiders. Would you need to have them sign an NDA?
That's a good question. I'm not the expert on that. That is a good question. Here's what I would recommend, and it goes back to my comment of just a couple slides ago. Think about if you're sharing access, you're sharing it for a reason. So if you're sharing it with a manufacturer's rep or a manufacturer's rep organization, and maybe they have 5 people that are selling your product, you and them should be working together. So you're cooperative, you're not adversaries. So that's kind of the way I'd start to look at. If you've got data in there, you really want to make sure it's protected, get the non-disclosure. I would say that's more rare than not. The other thing is make sure you protect, make sure you get the guardrails up, make sure that happens before you start sharing, giving them access. So give them access to only what you want them to have access to. Anything else?
The last question that we have is in regard to minimal use of CRM and also don't have time for CRM. Do you have any suggestions for optimally using CRMs in that instance?
Yeah, so that's a challenge, minimum time. So we have a lot of clients who are business owners and they're running a business and they are trying to do the sales part of the business. And it's a struggle just to get the sales part. Now there's the challenge of setting up a CRM and that takes time. I get that. But I would say you got to start taking it in chunks. Got to start allocating some time every week, even if it's just a couple hours to get this thing set up. And if you have the ability, if your business is of the type that 90% of it is Monday through Friday, I get that you want to relax on the weekends, but maybe spending just a couple hours on the weekend to start working on setting the thing up. There's value there. And the time it takes to set up a CRM is all front loaded. It's all on the front side. If you're doing this kind of the way it should be done, I've worked with clients that I've met with them on a weekly basis, and we take it a step at a time. And by the end of the first month, they're ready to rock and roll. So it's set up kind of based on what their format is, what their company looks like, what they want this process to look like. By the end of the first month, it's set up. Now you can move forward. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it anymore. You may want to tweak it, but so my point is it's front loaded the time.
Great. Thanks again, John. It looks like that's all the questions we have. If anyone has any follow-up questions or would like to schedule a meeting with a consultant, please feel free to visit our website at spdcorlando.com/consulting to schedule an appointment. Again, thank you all for attending. Please be on the lookout for that evaluation survey, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good one.